Welcome back, everyone, to another explainer. Today we're unpacking a truly fascinating evolution in enterprise architecture. We're taking a concept that literally revolutionized the factory floor, and we're looking at how it's fundamentally transforming, well, pretty much everything else. We're talking about the digital thread, but we're looking at how it's evolving way beyond traditional manufacturing into a realm of pure process excellence. We are going to explore a framework that takes the exact same data-driven rigor used to build airplanes and cars and applies it to things you can't even touch.
Okay, let's dive right into this, because this is exactly where the friction starts. Imagine you run a massive hospital system, or maybe a huge insurance firm, or a professional services company. You've got these massive data silos, right? And you hear about how manufacturing completely solved this problem with a digital thread. So naturally, you try to adopt it. But what happens when you try to force a rigid product-based factory framework onto behavioral, human-driven processes? Things like a delicate patient encounter or a really complex loan decision. Well, it usually fails, spectacularly. And that's because you're trying to track a physical part that simply doesn't exist.
So, here is our roadmap to untangle all of this. We're going to cover the baseline digital thread concept, why it breaks down outside the factory, the IPE Digital Recipe, its 6 process steps, a side-by-side comparison, and finally, where these two powerful frameworks actually converge. We'll build this up logically, step by step. All right, starting us off with Section 1, the digital thread concept.
Now, to understand where we're going, we really have to understand where this concept was born and why it was such a massive paradigm-shifting breakthrough for manufacturing in the first place. The term itself was officially born back in 2013, named in the U.S. Air Force's Global Horizons Report. By 2018, it was formalized academically at MIT by Singh and Wilcox. Fast forward to today, and it is the absolute gold standard for solving disconnected systems. See, before this thread, products data was trapped. You had completely disconnected systems. CAD for design, PLM for life cycles, ERP for resources. And this fragmentation, it forced incredible amounts of rework, mismatched bills of materials, and catastrophically expensive product recalls. The digital thread fixed all of that by connecting product life cycles into a single, unbroken, traceable flow.
And what's really interesting here is that the power of this thread relies on 4 defining characteristics: lifecycle integration, data continuity, real-time accessibility, and a single source of truth. Because of those 4 pillars, if an engineer updates a design, the digital thread flawlessly propagates that engineering change order across every single downstream system. Procurement, production, quality, everyone sees the update instantly. Literally no one is ever working from a stale record. It is incredibly powerful. But it is entirely product-centric. It totally revolves around a physical product, a tangible thing. Which brings us to Section 2, why the thread breaks down.
So what exactly happens when we shift our perspective away from the factory floor? When we look at organizations that don't make physical widgets, but still suffer from the exact same siloed data symptoms? Think about an insurer with claims scattered all over the place, or that hospital with fragmented electronic health records. They suffer from the same downstream errors, but a traditional digital thread just won't work for them, for 3 very specific structural reasons. First off, there's no CAD model. Non-manufacturing processes are anchored to people making decisions, not an engineering definition. Second, the life cycle is behavioral. A client engagement moves through human judgment calls, not machining centers and assembly stations. And third, the failure mode is entirely different. You aren't dealing with a badly configured physical part, you're dealing with failures in process governance. Tangible machining centers versus intangible human decisions. It is a completely different ballgame.
And this quote from John M. Cashat, he's the creator of the IPE model, it just hits the nail on the head regarding the severity of this gap. A broken non-manufacturing thread produces an undocumented process, an unowned decision point, or an uncontrolled source of variation. Without a physical product to act as the anchor of the thread, the entire system of process ownership and control just crumbles. You don't end up with a bad widget, you get systemic, totally invisible, and highly expensive organizational chaos.
Okay, let's look at the solution in Section 3, the IPE Digital Recipe. If the traditional thread connects products, what connects processes? Well, the answer is the Integrated Process Excellence Framework, which is rooted in Roger Slater's foundational work from back in 1996. To make this work without a physical product, you need a different kind of architecture. So the crucial point here is understanding this specific framework, KIV, KPV, KOV. That stands for Key Input Variables, Key Process Variables, and Key Output Variables.
This causal data architecture is what makes the IPE Digital Recipe a genuinely traceable thread, not just some shared folder full of static PDF procedures. It actually establishes causal linkage. If a key input changes, the model shows you exactly which process and output variables are affected downstream. It is literally the process governance equivalent of an engineering change order. It keeps that human-driven thread completely traceable.
And I really want to emphasize that this is not just some pie-in-the-sky academic theory. 81. That is the number of sector-specific IP packs that already exist today as complete collections. We're talking domains from healthcare to financial services, pharmaceuticals, and more. This framework is already out in the wild, actively solving that invisible process problem across massive global industries.
Moving right along to Section 4, the 6 process steps.
So how do we actually take that KIV, KPV, KOV logic and deploy it across a real organization? Well, when we compare the 6 IP steps directly to their manufacturing analogs, a really fascinating difference pops up right away at step 1, create a positive environment. Notice how there is absolutely no direct analog for that in the manufacturing thread? That's because the traditional digital thread assumes that process governance and leadership behaviors just inherently exist. But the IPE framework knows better. It explicitly builds those behaviors in as step 1, because without them, any data architecture is just going to decay. From there, we flow through the rest. Identifying variables acts as your CAD model. Developing worksheets acts as your bill of materials. Communicating standardizes that real-time access. Controlling monitors variation, just like a quality inspection. And step 6, improving the process, that acts as your field service feedback loop, continually feeding root cause analysis right back into step 2. It's a brilliant self-reinforcing continuous cycle.
Let's look at Section 5, side-by-side thread comparison.
And this brilliantly illustrates the paradigm shift we're talking about. On the left, you've got the traditional thread, tracking a physical parts configuration. It's all product data, driven by CAD and bills of materials, propagating engineering changes. Now look at the right side, the IPE Digital Recipe. This is process data, tracking behavioral, processes, activities, and human elements. It connects ERP, PLM, and crucially, CRM systems, all driven by that KIV, KPV, KOV causal architecture. It ensures that ownership, control, and method are tracked with the exact same rigor as a piece of sheet metal.
Finally, Section 6, where 2 threads converge.
Now, as we synthesize all this, you might be thinking these are competing ideologies, but they absolutely are not. They completely converge on the discipline of data architecture. Both frameworks fiercely reject static, disconnected, single-point-in-time records. Both heavily favor continuously live, traceable, causally linked flows of information. But honestly, the most fascinating takeaway is this. Even a factory running a flawless, state-of-the-art traditional digital thread still desperately needs the IPJE Digital Recipe. Why? Because under that factory roof, you still have HR onboarding, quality management system administration, customer complaint handling, and financial close processes. Those are human, non-product processes, and they need the IPJE framework to govern them. Which brings us to the ultimate question you really have to ask about your own organization's architecture. Take a hard look at your systems right now. Is your thread only connecting product data, or does it also need to connect process data, the ownership, the control, and the causal logic behind every single human decision your organization makes? If it's the latter, it might just be time to look beyond the factory floor and start exploring the IPE Digital Recipe for yourself. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking the hard questions about your data, and I'll catch you in the next one.